In this video I will implement CRUD operations for our project. Before that we have to create some kind of the structure of packages for my project to make it simpler, easier to perform the CRUD operations. So basically I'm gonna apply some kind of the architecture for my internal project. So I'm gonna add a couple of packages to our main package. So first of all we need the controller, then we need the repository, so controller, model, repository and service. So at this moment we've got two models, two tables in the database, which is car and user. We have to give opportunity to Java to communicate with MySQL. So we have to create two interfaces for our two models. So new Java class interface, and I will call it car repository. And the car repository has to extend the CRUD repository to be able to perform CRUD operations. And CRUD repository, and here we will type just car and integer. Yeah, we have to import car class. That's it, and we have to do something similar for our user repository interface, and we'll call it user repository. Extends CRUD repository, user integer Alt Enter as a shortcut to import the user. So our repository is ready. So now service. As this is a good practice to provide some kind of the structure to the project, I'm gonna create another package. I will call it service interfaces, and I'm gonna create two interfaces, one for the car and one for a user. So new Java class interface, and I will call it car service interface. Okay, and here I'm gonna declare 5 methods for our interface. They are gonna cover the CRUD operations, so it will be like for select, for insert, for get, for update and for delete. So first of all is gonna be like for the insert operation. So public and we'll receive it. So it's gonna be user save user, and I'm gonna provide user. Okay, and later on we'll implement those CRUD operations. This is just an interface, so here we are just declaring those methods. Another method is gonna be public and I'm gonna get all users from the table, so that's gonna be in return I will receive iterable of user, get all users. Okay. Another method it will be to get individual users, so public user will receive a single user, get user by ID, so it just will be the ID. We have to provide ID in this method to be able to receive a specific user. Next is just to delete certain user, so public it is gonna be void because we are just deleting, so if we are not receiving anything back, delete user, and we have to provide an ID to because if you want to delete certain user we have to do some it according to something, so I assume it will be an ID. Of course you can extend that logic, but for simplicity we'll leave it as it is. And the last one is gonna be an update, so public void update user, so we will have to receive a user and ID of that user. Okay, so here's our declarations of the CRUD operations. The next operation it will be to implement those methods. Yeah, I've just realized I've made a mistake, as I was creating car service interface and I was typing user. Of course that's a mistake. All of that should be car. Okay. So as I said, we've got two interfaces for our CRUD operations, one for the car and another one is for a user. As I have only two tables in my database, in my model, so if I will add another table, another entity to my model, then I would have to create another interface for a specific model as well. So now I will implement CRUD methods for my models. So service new Java class, and this time I will call it as car service. That service has to implement my interface, which is car service interface. And as you can see, there's a message here. Yeah, so we can use automatic option implement methods. So I want to implement all those methods automatically. That's another cool feature of of IntelliJ that, you know, as we've got interface, so we have to implement those methods, and IntelliJ give us that opportunity to create a backbone for those methods, like empty stats. As this is gonna be service, we have to inform IntelliJ that it is gonna be a service. Okay, Alt Enter, import class for service. Okay. To be able to perform the CRUD operations, we have to provide some kind of a connection with the repository. So it's gonna be auto wired user repository. Okay. First operation is to insert a new car to the database. So basically we are just gonna type return user repository save car. Of course, that's a mistake. I'm thinking on both classes at the same time. Of course, it's car repository. Okay, so this is our insert CRUD operation. The next one is to get all users from the database. So return user car repository find all. Okay, and the database will return iterable, so that's why the return type is iterable. The next one is find a car by its ID. So, and we will type return car repository find by ID, but it could happen that the ID which we'll provide doesn't exist in the database, which means the object of type car of certain ID just doesn't exist in the database. So we have to like make sure to sort that issue. So we can just type or else null, which means this method get car by ID will return a car if the car of certain ID exists in the database. On the other ways is return just null. Okay, now delete. Here we are not returning a thing, so just car repository delete by ID. And the last is for the update, and I think this is the most complicated, because first of all we have to find a car in the database of the ID that we want to update. So car equals car repository find by ID. Okay. Because there is a car here as well. So let's call it just like temp car. and of course we have to dot save closure or else null. Okay. Okay, so in a case that user will provide wrong ID, which means he provide that ID doesn't exist, so there's nothing to update. So in that case, I'm just gonna skip that. I'm just gonna finish that method. I'm not gonna perform anything else. So if temp car equals null, just return. Otherwise, I will type like temp car set ID to ID. But I think it's not necessary. Yes, it's not necessary because the ID has to be ID of this specific ID. Number has to be exactly the same because we are looking for according to this number. So temp car set speed to car speed. Car gets speed. So our car has got just one property, which is speed. So if you want to update something, it's definitely gonna be the speed. So we have to update that and just car repository save temp car. Yeah. So that's all the CRUD operations that I wanted to implement for car model. I'm gonna do the same thing for user. Just give me a second. So I've created CRUD operations for a user as well. Exactly the same way as I did it for car. So just add the duck service, implements user service interface, then I've automatically generated stats for methods. Then I've implemented methods. I've auto-wired user repository, and here are my 5 CRUD operations. In next video I'm gonna show you how to actually do something with our database, how to call, how to insert some methods, some information into the database, how to check what's inside the database as well.